Well. It's day 2 of Worlds, day 2 of the Playins, and all the fun, kind of. It was an okay day. Hi, this is Vision Nile, and welcome to your Daily Sweepers, our review show for all of the days that Worlds is going to be playing. My name is Sam. I'm one of the 3 hosts here in Vision Denial. If you're new to this, hello, we have a variety of different types of videos that we do in terms of looking at international League of Legends competitions. So happy to see you around. If you enjoy the video, like and subscribe. Leave your comments and your thoughts about how you thought today went. That being said, you're going to be seeing at the bottom over here a set of highlights. Not the whole highlights, but some of the highlights of each of the games that I'm going to be talking about. Those come courtesy of the VCS. Go check out their YouTube channel. The Vietnamese League is fantastic. They make great content, and they have a great league. And I would not be able to make these videos as well if it wasn't for them. So to go check them out. Without further ado, let's take a look at the second day of play-ins. And the first game of the day was Peace versus Homalife. Now, much better showing from Homalife. It's unfortunate because Peace are demonstrating a clear understanding of the meta, some strong drafting, and a proper map movement in the early game. And that said, Homalife played cleaner, faster, and more consistently, and each laner is just a cut above the rest. There's something to say regarding vision play. Peace showed that Homalife are not approaching vision in a way that enables the plays they pulled off this game. And so Homalife is usually just going off on plays as if they know exactly what's happening without actually doing any of the proper setup. And they were taking advantage of when the mid game arrived to help stall out the game when necessary. Peace do have a chance to win their next 2 games. It's not very strong. And to do so, they'll need to draft in ways that allow BABIP to carry without having to compromise lane matchups. Now, I say this because their last 2 games now had BABIP either be the main carry with weaker lane matchups or vice versa, where they had strong lane matchups, but BABIP couldn't do anything to help with it. Now, to say that Homalife are playing a little haphazard is just selling it short. They're not playing cleanly, right? And because of that, it's causing their momentum to stall in places that don't need to. And with only one opponent left in red Canids Kalunga, with much better players than the other 2 emerging regions of their group, they're likely to be properly punished if they don't clean it up. And I think this is also an indicator because they're likely to move on to the next stage if they do win the next game. And the group that they're going to be slotted into will not allow them to get away with some of these sloppy setups. Weaker vision out of all 4 Korean teams that have qualified for Worlds, as well as weaker vision in general, even compared to their group. And that's not just to say that vision is the sole factor here. It seems like they're playing unaware or uncaring regarding the whole thing. And that can't be true, right? These are dedicated players. So it's obvious that they're not just playing haphazard for the sake of it. There's clearly something happening in terms of them not being on the same page at all times. With that, Homalife wins and are now 2-1, and Peace at 0-2. In the next game, we have Red Canids Kalunga, or Red, versus LNG Esports. Now let's start with some positives, okay? LNG looks great in this game and seems to be avoiding the limit testing shenanigans that they had yesterday. A strong approach to vision and wave manipulation from mid to late game allowed them to isolate targets and catch them out during movements around the map, and use the triple assassin setup to burst targets before Red can apply any of their wood conditions. Conversely, Red showed an incredible first 10 minutes of solid control of neutral objectives, laning, and their approach to win conditions when they had the chance. This is a little different from what most of us would have expected if you've watched any of the playoffs or the regular season from Red, since they usually aim for stronger late game approaches and team fights. That's usually what got them going. They're usually off of their prowess mechanically. So this was a nice change of pace given for them. Unfortunately, it looked like they became timid and hesitant to apply a stronger team fight setup once LNG had garnered a comeback to the pace and were catching their players out frequently. Sadly, I think that despite a stronger team fight setup, they drafted a composition that would have had a harder time transitioning to the late game stage. Now, part of the issue comes with how picks are prioritized, and LNG trapped them in a state of must pick the best, forcing them to show their solo lanes as well as their bot lane. And LNG showed the strongest red side draft approach so far, a theme that we're going to see during the rest of the day. Even if I think their draft required a more difficult approach, they were not as simple, that could have just easily as failed. LNG still managed to take advantage of the trappings that Red found themselves in to solidly control the mid game. I do think that how to mention this, because this is the only game that LNG plays today, and given the how well poised they are to just qualify for the group stage without having to do a best of 5, I wonder, having to go from one set of best of ones to another set of best of ones, will they be developing bad habits? Because they are still a little bit more on the loosey-goosey end of things. And more because they don't seem to be taking their opponents as seriously. And for the most part, it's not like an attitude that I can totally disrespect. But they did get caught out for quite some time. So who knows? It just didn't feel solid. They still do have better players bar for bar, or lane per lane. And so it was to be expected that this was the result. Now Red is still playing phenomenally in this game. I'm just surprised more than anything else about their sudden peak in the early game as opposed to what I would have expected in their late game play. LNG wins and are now 3-0, with Red being 1-1. Next up, we have Infinity versus Peace. Now, as the theme of the tourney mentions, it's make it or break it, right? Especially in this game, where I have a feeling many of these teams are still getting a hang of the drafting. Nothing too egregious, but it's clear that cohesiveness is not always a priority in these drafts. And that's no more clear than with this game. Now, Peace has shown a strong ability around a very specific kind of composition. And really, all you need to do in that case is just ban out Lilia. You leave that there. Uh, so they didn't have the best early game. And at no point were they so behind it couldn't be caught up at any point. I think the difference here is that the individual laners across the board were better during this game. It's hard to play around specific leads developed across the jungle and two lanes, especially when Infinity had most of their lead on Bugax, who was playing Gnar. And I think it was interesting that they kept going to the top side, right? It showed a clear lack of understanding of their win conditions when they just auto focused very hard on their lead in the top side. And they have one more game, Infinity, if I remembered correct. Yeah, they have one more game, Infinity, and they're going to be playing against LNG. So there's not very much hope regarding that. Might as well consider them done and dusted. That being said, there is something to show for at least a statement to show that you were not just some team that showed up and flopped. And part of that would have to do with being a little bit more globally aware and not just focus on where your gold so happened to fall. You have to be able to control where your gold is going to go and use whatever accidental gold went to one side to enable other places. And it didn't seem like that's what they were doing. It seemed like they were really desperate to make sure that their one lead stayed relevant the entire time and didn't invest in other places. Which is unfortunate. Now, the coordination wasn't quite there to fully utilize whatever lead they did have, even if they did go laser focused. And when both teams aimed to get leads via team fight, Peace was better equipped to handle each of the fights as they came. Their composition was better suited at distributing gold evenly and to be able to attack disparate parts of the team fights in ways that allowed them to still keep control of the pacing. That said, Peace are still not in full control of the pacing during these games. They're creating moments where they would have, where they have to fight a member down, and if Infinity had much stronger vision game, allowing them to play around objectives with some freedom, if Peace had a stronger vision game, because Infinity did, they probably would have been able to keep their create more momentum instead of just winning fights and then haphazardly going from objective to objective and then nothing else. It's a lot of fighting, maybe get the thing if you can, reset. Doesn't fully work. Now, Infinity do have much stronger vision game, and it allows them to play around the objectives more and with more freedom. They just didn't use that vision for team fights, unfortunately, which is really unfortunate because that probably would have helped them really well, given everything. Yeah. Now, Peace gained some control over their standing at Worlds, with at worst another tiebreaker and at best a shot for the BO5. And given who Infinity have to play next, it's likely that they're going to be able to do the BO5. With that, Peace win and are now 1-2. And Infinity are 0-3. Now, next we have, I believe this is the last one for Group A. Yes. We've got Red, Canids, Kalunga versus Homolife. Now brace yourselves, okay? Even if the results were expected, okay, they didn't the events themselves, or sorry, even if the results were expected, the events themselves weren't entirely. This is 2 games in a row now that Red has shown like that the 2 toughest play-in teams have flawed early games and are fairly beatable. Like I cannot stress how much the early games that LNG and Hololive have brought up are severely lacking. It leaves them with much to be desired and a lot harder to approach their win conditions in their mid game, and that will really bite them in the butt when they have to enter groups / best of fives. Now, an incredible first 10 minutes in competitive mid game has us seeing high hopes for Red. And like the casters mentioned in the game, these are emotional players, and they're very new players to the international stage. So it's expected to feel this kind of frustration. I commend Red on their preparation and approach to neutral play in lane phase. So it's only uphill from here, right? They can pivot properly and be able to capitalize on their strong laning phase and their really good preparation that they've done for these early games. And that so long as they keep up the neutral play, the only thing that really needs work here is their vision. It's really a cause for a lot of the headstrong engages and plays that they have that hamper and really delay and slow down any plays or any momentum that they would have. Now, it's not any worse than what Hololive have in terms of approach to the game. I think the major difference between these 2 teams is that one is more calm, cool, collected with stronger coordination and experience on how to pivot and adapt to different win conditions when behind or when not in control completely of the pace of the game. It's clear at this point that Hololive have decided to take each play at neutrals, turrets, or scrimmages as an opportunity to retake the pace of the game, and the play after to solidify it. To clarify what I mean by that is that there's about 2 or 3 different approaches to going about each fight that come up, especially during objectives. There are get the immediate reward and back off, capitalize as much as possible, or take a bit of the risk of losing the losing the ability to get to a different play first while setting up for future plays later that you actually want to focus on. Easy example is using your having your two solo laners push in for pressure, diving the top laner to then transition to getting a herald, to then use that to push into mid, to then go into dragon. Those seem like very easy steps, right? They seem like it would be a great time. It's not super easy to actually pull all that off, and usually you only get up to 2 steps to 3 steps at a time. And most of the weaker teams tend to back off really early after the first successful play. Most of the time that's what's going to happen, but it's clear that Hololive really hammer in an idea of keeping the play on as long as possible. Now, this will result in many awkward plays that are show them that they're out of position, but they do have some purpose, right? Don't always look at Daft or Chovy being caught out or Morgan just not being in the right place at the right time as they're clearly not paying attention. I think it's mostly because I think they're misevaluating what the next play should be. And that's something that should be really noted on because they've guaranteed their BO5. And so the Group B teams should be paying attention to this kind of thing. Now, and I say that because I don't think they'll be able to get away with it during the best of fives. And they should probably course correct it to make sure any plays that they secure a lead isn't one that, costs them down the line. With that, Life wins and are now 3-1, securing a minimum of second place and a best of five showing. And Red are 1-2. Leaving only 2 more games left for Group A to play tomorrow. Next, we have the first game of Day 2 for Group B, Beyond Gaming versus Cloud9. Now, this looks more like the Beyond Gaming I was expecting. Honestly, I didn't expect them to be so bad like they were yesterday. This was more what I was expecting. Scrappy. And like a little bit more on the really trying hard to like gain any type of foothold. Unfortunately for them, C9 is just playing significantly better than expected. Now, there's a trend of teams drafting themselves into draft while on the blue side, and it's rather unfortunate. There's nothing particularly wrong with the comp that Beyond Gaming drafted. It just lends itself into a very easy group of counter picks that synergize well and answer all of the win conditions. So there's a lot wrong with it. I think this is something I'll probably talk about in my final thoughts when it comes to the drafting, because 6 of the 8 games were won on the red side, where a major factor was the draft. And we'll get to that. So yeah, C9 did well to recognize all these things, but it's unfortunate to see that there's some disconnect with some of their plays. Now, each member on C9 are playing as if they are the ones to lead the win. It's like a solo queue-ish mentality, kind of. I don't think that's entirely true. These are not like new players to the international stage. I'm pretty sure all of these players outside of the MSI showing have significant international play. It's just that every time that I see any individual players being the playmaker, it tells that there's some sort of disconnect or lack of coordination going on. And it tends to halt their momentum completely when it doesn't succeed. And that's something I really hope that they would avoid on a long-term scale. Now, C9 are still playing incredibly well with some good wave manipulation and map movement that made so much up for their leads, right? So many of these plays, even if they failed, they didn't lose a lot of the momentum because of how much of the setup they did for wave manipulation and their vision. Now, I would like a better approach to this vision and slightly less reckless neutral setups, but, so far they're playing significantly better than expected, and I can only expect more improvement from here on out, right? So far, C9 have faced what is arguably the 2 toughest opponents so far in the group, and if they secure a win against Galatasaray, they've almost guaranteed a bye into their groups, which allows them a long time to practice and set up for things. Beyond Gaming, on the other hand, do still look a little frazzled and not as coordinated as they were during their playoff run. Instead of leaning into their strengths from bot side play, they seem to be trying to match their opponents and having topside heavy compositions, more of the same kind of trappings and fallings of the kind of testing the waters of the meta with these drafts. They seem to be and it's unfortunate because they're avoiding to enable the playstyles that got them to Worlds, and they should probably lean into it way more often because of how incredible their bot side play is. Um, I honestly would reevaluate the approach from Beyond Gaming's drafting and win conditions. If they keep it up, they could be seeded fourth in group, or if UOL beats them, not very likely, they could be last. And that's something to actually be cognizant of, because Beyond Gaming was the favorites of this group. With that, C9 wins and are 2-0, and Beyond Gaming are 0-2. Next, we have Galatasaray versus Detonation Focus Me. And boy, oh boy, this is the DFM we were expecting. Yes. And if people are keeping count, that is now 6 games in a row that Red Side wins. This, however, this is not so much about a poor drafting. This time, Galatasaray have managed to be the better team at drafting on the blue side so far, and far more about the application of their win conditions and strengths. Detonation Focus Me leaned into their win conditions during this game, opting into focus on bot side scrimmages and frequent global contests, all the while outmaneuvering Galatasaray at every stage of the game. Now, Galatasaray didn't just sit there and die. It definitely looked like it, but they didn't just sit there and die. They kept being proactive at every stage to either answer or contest any given play or neutral objective, even if it was slightly slower. But just like Red, this is still also a young and emotional team, so you can tell the frustration was there. And I want to commend them on their approach, right? There's also a team that's playing significantly better than expected, and by all means, this is Detonation Focus Me at their most solid. I don't think this is their best, but this is their most solid. And so it is not a surprise to me that this is the result. I do want to commend, though, Detonation Focus Me on their solid vision and neutral play, as they had a complete hold on it the entire game, especially against Galatasaray, who, like I mentioned, they were on form. They were being considered the new favorite of the group alongside C9, given how the other teams were playing. Except for Unicorns of Love for me. Anywho, I'm a huge fan also of the draft that Detonation Focus Me did. It felt very different from what had been played so far across all of the teams. And it shows a willingness to adapt and change things up when they aren't working. Something that's needed to move on to groups. Like, you need to be able to adapt and change and not just like laser focus yourself into what the supposed meta is. So if Detonation Focus Me keeps up with this form and assures the team fighting gets a little cleaner, I have no doubts they'll be able to handle Beyond Gaming and likely secure the 2nd seed. Now, Galatasaray, hold your head up. You got one more game against C9 that will show what you can do, right? What better way to show a solid pivot than now? Detonation Focus Me wins and are now 2-1, and Galatasaray are 2-1 also. Well, penultimate game of the day, Beyond Gaming versus Unicorns of Love. Hey, blue side won this time. Unicorns of Love are not looking so great. I don't like being right this way, but they are so far the worst performing team at Worlds. It doesn't look like they understand the meta as it is right now and are often drafting in similar ways they did during the playoffs run. And those weren't great runs either. The problem in this game don't solely come from drafts or summoner picks. It stems from a lack of understanding how to set up their macros and move around the map. Consistently being caught out of position when fights are not initiated, lacking aggressive vision, and poor coordination makes for a bad combo. I know they aren't technically out, but I heavily doubt they'll be able to beat C9 tomorrow. Um, Now, Beyond Gaming should be credited, though. This isn't like an automatically free game. Solid understanding of their win condition and actively playing around their strengths needs to be commended, but they also kept a foothold on the neutral objectives and avoided any unnecessary fights. I'm a little concerned regarding some of their team fight approaches, since it tends to give more um, to UL than what was needed, or more to their opponents than what is needed. Cleaning that up will go a long way for the rest of the tourney. Um, I also really enjoyed the last little bit as they responded to UL's solid engage to finally close out the game. If they keep this up, they might be able to get a rematch for Galactasaray for seeding if they beat Detonation Focus Me. If. Beyond Gaming wins and are now 1-2. Unicorns of Love are 0-3. C9 versus Galactasaray. Hey, look at this. NA still has a better record than Korea. No, in all seriousness, this was not a fantastic game out of Cloud9. I was not a fan of their draft, nor their approach to the mid game or how they applied pressure for neutral objectives. This feels more like of the same from the previous game. It feels a lot like limit testing that in a normal circumstance usually would have been punished appropriately. Unfortunately, Galactasaray could not find footing in the leads that they could accrue, nor could they outlane their opponents, who indeed do outclass them role for role, which is an unfortunate circumstance. A lot of the players in these emerging regions tend to be not up to snuff compared to the other ones from any of the legacy regions. Now, that isn't to say that like Galactasaray didn't punish or move around the map better, because they did move around the map better. The major crux came around the team fights and wave manipulation, a thing that I've mentioned already that Cloud9 is excelling in. This is a very different kind of Cloud9 that are moving around the map in ways that are like not what I expect from them. So despite my complaints about the drafts and Cloud9's priorities, they still managed to keep wave pressure ups at all time regardless of the lane assignments, allowing them to move for more freedom to ward and create good pockets of vision. And to have better map movement, which is something that Galactasaray were struggling. They were struggling in terms of their vision to be able to keep up. And I think that was a major factor in this game, more so than draft, more so than the specific like lane to lane matchup and skills. Now, Galactasaray do have a guaranteed slot for the best of 5 stage of Playins. For at least from, I say that. No, actually, no, they do. They definitely do have a guaranteed spot for the play-ins, for like the best of 5 for the play-ins, right? Now there's a chance for a 3-way tie. So because they're not playing tomorrow, they can rest, and hunker down, possibly pivot for a random game, so that you can properly set up for macro movements and wave manipulations better, as that might be something they need for a tiebreaker. Otherwise, I think they'll do fine in the best of 5s. I don't know if they'll beat the second. I don't think they'll beat Homolife if they're likely to be the second seed, but I do think they'll do well, relatively speaking. Now, Cloud9, you're assuredly going to qualify for groups automatically, given that your only opponent left is quite literally Unicorns of Love. So long as you don't lose, because your chances for a tiebreaker are just as likely if you do lose. With that, Cloud9 wins and are 3-0. Galactasaray are 2-2. And that's how we end the game. Or end the day. What for my thoughts? I think that people still don't quite have an understanding of what is meta yet. There are like sprinkles of, sometimes there are some um enchanters in the bot lane. The understanding of how to apply assassins is kind of a little over the place. What the frick is up with Tryndamere? Who, like, on paper could be a good pseudo tank, but doesn't tend to be. Runs away a lot, and the creates pressures, goes away. It's similar to how LeBlanc plays. I also don't think blue side is super valuable. And granted, when the best of 5 section comes up, they'll get the chance to pick their sides, because I don't think they do. I think this is like predetermined which sides they get to be on, unless the tiebreaker happens. So I think it's something to look into, is that the better teams tend to play better and draft better on the blue side. Granted, these are the 10 lowest seeded teams. It's not necessarily the 10 worst teams, but it's the 10 lowest seeded teams. So I wouldn't expect much of a grasp on the meta at this point. I'm just surprised that there isn't a more cohesive idea of what the meta is going to be. Yeah, that's mostly my takeaway from today. You guys let me know in the comments down below what you think. What's your takeaway from day 2 of Playins? Is everything going out as much as you expected? A little bit of differences. I'd love to see or read any of your thoughts with it. I'm honestly kind of happy with the way that some of the some of the teams are playing, less on others. With that, I would like to thank all of you who watch. Really appreciate it. Uncertain of when our schedule will be for the regular podcast of Vision Denial. We'll figure that out as soon as possible. Otherwise, leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video, and I'll see you tomorrow for maybe a short and/or long video. We'll see. Thank you all for watching.